Good morning, Moirai V'Rabosai, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to our weekly Parsha Shiur. This week, instead of discussing the Parsha of the week, we're going to learn together some insights from the Haftorah that we study together, that we read together this Shabbos. This Shabbos, of course, being the Shabbos before Purim, we read Parsha Zachor, and the special Haftorah is read in honor of Parsha Zachor. The Haftorah is taken from Shmuel Aleph, Perek Tes Vav, from Pasuk Beis. According to the Ashkenazic tradition, we begin at Pasuk Beis all the way through till Pasuk Lamed Daled. Again, that's Shmuel Aleph, Perek Tes Vav. And the Torah tells the very, very famous story where the Navi at the time, that is Shmuel HaNavi, Shmuel the prophet, the one who actually anointed and made Shaul as king in the first place, is sent by Hashem to Shaul HaMelech, to Shaul the king, and to give Shaul the instruction to go and wipe out the nation of Amalek. Hashem says, Pokadati es asher osa Amalek liYisrael. Hashem says, I still remember what Amalek did to the Jewish people. They were the first ones to attack the Jews after they had left Mitzrayim. Hashem says, through Shmuel HaNavi, through Shmuel the prophet, to Shaul the king, go and wipe out the nation of Amalek. I'm going to read just a couple of psukim inside. If you have the Haftorah in front of you, Shmuel says to Shaul, Ato, pasuk Gimel, Ato now, lech, go, v'hikisos Amalek, strike Amalek, v'hacharamtem es kol asher lo, and you shall destroy everything that is his. Hashem says, don't have any mercy. V'heimato, and you shall slay, you shall kill, may ish ad isha, both men and women, may oilel v'ad yonek, infant and nursing baby, mishor v'ad seh, the oxen and the sheep, migomel v'ad chamor, the camels and the donkeys, everything Shaul HaMelech is told should be wiped out. Of course, the simple reason why we read this Haftorah is because it's connected to Parshas Zachor that we just read. Zachor was Zachor es asher osa l'cha Amalek, the mitzvah to remember Amalek, the mitzvah to annihilate Amalek, the mitzvah to wipe out their memory, etc. And here Shaul is given an instruction by Shmuel to go and carry out this mitzvah and destroy Amalek. Now, you all know the story. The story is that Shaul HaMelech, Shaul the king, botches the mission. What happens? He gathers a large army, over 210,000 soldiers. Excuse me. He gathers a large army, and they go out and they declare war against Amalek. And to cut a long story short, he has an incredible military victory. He wipes out the entire nation of Amalek. The only thing he doesn't do is he doesn't kill the animals. Again, remember, he was instructed by Hashem to wipe out the animals as well. That he doesn't do. And he also doesn't kill Agag. Agag is the king of Amalek. Shaul HaMelech leaves him alive. In captivity, but alive. At that point, Hashem comes to Shmuel HaNavi. Again, Shmuel is the prophet of the time. Shmuel is the one who anointed Shaul as king in the first place. Hashem comes to Shmuel HaNavi and Hashem says to him, Nichamti, Hashem says, I regret that I ever anointed Shaul as king. Because he's turned away from me, Hashem says, and he didn't fulfill my words. And Shmuel HaNavi understands that Shaul has botched the mission, has botched the mandate. So the Torah describes that Shmuel HaNavi goes and he meets Shaul HaMelech. A long discussion ensues between Shmuel and Shaul. If we have time in Mitzvah Hashem today, we'll get into some of the details of the conversation. back and forth and back and forth. It's really actually an argument, but the Torah dedicates a very surprising amount of airtime to the actual argument that takes place between Shmuel Hanavi and Shaul HaMelech. And it begins with Shaul, the conversation begins with Shaul the king, giving Shmuel Hanavi, giving Shmuel the prophet, the Shalom Aleichem. And Shaul says to him, Baruch Atol Hashem, you are blessed to Hashem, Shalom Aleichem. And even before Shmuel says one word, Shaul says to him, Hakimoisi es dvar Hashem, I fulfilled the word of Hashem. So Shaul is either lying or completely in denial that he's completely messed this thing up. And Shmuel says to him, what are you talking about? Why do I hear the sound of sheep in my ears? And the sound of cattle? What is this, the sound of animals that I hear? And Shaul says, oh, that's nothing. I brought them from the Amalekim. The people, Shaul says, the nation, the people I'm with, they had mercy on the best of the flock, on the best of the animals, and they brought them, and that we intend to offer them up as karbonos to Hashem. As the conversation develops, it becomes clear that it wasn't just animals that had been left alive. It was also the king, Agag. And Shmuel Hanavi tells him not just that he has not fulfilled the word of Hashem, but actually, Mo'asto es dvar Hashem, he says, you've despised the word of Hashem. You really messed this thing up badly. And Shaul insists. Shaul says, no, I fulfilled the word of Hashem. You know, with the people brought back animals for the sake of sacrifices, but all the people are killed. And even Agag, I just left alive, but even he's in captivity. And Shmuel says, no, you've messed this up. And then Shmuel does three things in no particular order. Number one, Shmuel informs Shaul. It is at this point that Shmuel informs Shaul that kingship, that royalty that was destined to be Shaul HaMelech's and his descendants for all eternity was taken away from him by Hashem. He says, Hashem has removed Korah, Hashem has Mamluchos Yisrael, Hashem has removed the kingdom of the Jews from you. Shaul would continue to act as king until the end of his days, but it was already known that this was going to have no continuation at all. It was basically over. That's number one. Number two, Shmuel Hanavi kills Agag. He puts actually Agag to death. And number three, Shmuel, in no uncertain terms, expresses his disappointment in Shaul, to the point that Shaul has to beg him, please, just to save face, for the two of them to go and face the Jewish people together and to daven to Hashem. Even that Shmuel Hanavi doesn't want to do. So Shmuel on a personal level, Shmuel expresses his disappointment, his upset, his anguish over what has happened. He expresses it to Shaul in no uncertain terms. And it's clear from here that as far as Shaul HaMelech is concerned, it's basically over and things are only going to spiral downward from here. All right, this is basically the story. Of course, there are many details that I'm glossing over. It's a story we're all familiar with. And again, we'll read it in the Haftorah this Shabbos, Parsha Zachor, as we always do the Shabbos before Purim. Now, without getting into too much detail about the actual Megillas Esther itself, but this story takes up the story of Shaul not successfully fulfilling the word of Hashem, not really fulfilling the word of Hashem, and not actually wiping out Amalek. This story makes an obvious appearance in Megillas Esther. Again, very briefly. What happens in Megillas Esther, you all know this, is that Haman gets the royal signature on the decree to wipe out the entire Jewish nation, men, women, and children, in one day. And Mordechai tells Esther to go to the king, to go to Achashverosh, and to intercede on her people's behalf. And Esther is hesitant. Esther says, listen, Kol Avdei HaMelech, all the servants of the king, V'am Adinais HaMelech, and everybody, all the citizens of the king, everybody in all 127 lands of Achashverosh know, Asher Kol Ish V'Isha Asher Yovay Al HaMelech, any man or woman that shows up at the king's inner chamber, Asher Lo Yikori, without an invitation, without a summons, Achas Dosei Lahomis, they're put to death immediately. Esther says to her uncle, Mordechai, she says, you want me to go to the king without an invitation? What's the seichel? What's the logic there? Everybody knows if you walk into the king without an invitation, you get beheaded. You walk out a head shorter. Esther is very hesitant. In an effort to convince Esther to go to Achashverosh, Mordechai tells her those very famous words. Mordechai tells Esther, listen to me. If you don't go to the king now, now is your moment, Mordechai tells her. Now is your moment to step up and be the hero of the Jewish people. If you don't go, quote, Revach v'hatzolo yamoid la Yehudim imokam acher. The Jewish people will be saved some other way. Salvation will come to the Jewish people from some other direction. But va'at ubeis ovich, you and your father's home will be lost. Va'at ubeis ovich toived. Mordechai tells Esther, if you don't go to the king now, the Jews will be saved some other way. The Jewish nation will be fine. What's at stake is not the destiny of the Jewish people. What is at stake is the destiny of you, Mordechai says to Esther, and your father's house. Umiya ideya, who knows, says Mordechai, perhaps this was the reason why you became queen in the first place. All right, very famous, very powerful words that Mordechai tells Esther. But what did he mean when he said to her, you and your father's house will be lost? What's that supposed to mean? And of course, here, all the commentaries explain. It's very simple. It's very clear when you study the story and you understand the context of what's going on. What's happening is very clear. Mordechai and Esther themselves are both descendants of Shaul HaMelech, direct descendants of Shaul HaMelech. Mordechai and Esther are direct descendants of the king in our story who was supposed to annihilate Amalek and didn't do it completely. Haman, the arch enemy of the Jews in the story of Purim, he is, of course, a descendant of the king, a direct descendant of the king of Amalek, called Agag. Although Shaul HaMelech had wiped out the entire nation of Amalek, only the king remained in captivity. Only the king Agag remained in captivity. Somehow the king Agag manages, between the time that Shaul was supposed to kill him and Shmuel HaNavi actually killed him, he manages to impregnate a woman, and through that there is a continuation to his bloodline and to his anti-Semitism, and Haman came directly from him, which is why the Megillah refers to him as, literally, Haman Hoagogi, Haman, the descendant of Agag. So Mordechai is telling Esther, he's pleading with her, please take the initiative. Please go to the king. Please step up to the plate and save the Jewish people, because if not, you and your father's house will be lost. Meaning, Mordechai tells Esther, let's not make the same mistake that our ancestors made when Shaul was supposed to kill Agag. If Shaul would have killed Agag, the king of Amalek, when he was supposed to, says Mordechai to Esther, we'd never be dealing with this now. There would never have been a Haman. The whole thing would have been over. Instead, Shaul misses the moment, leaves Agag alive long enough to have descendants, to have children. And because of that, Mordechai tells Esther, because of that, we have Haman. So we, says Mordechai to Esther, you and I, descendants of Shaul HaMelech, now have the opportunity to fix, to be mashlim, to conclude the unfinished business that Shaul HaMelech left unresolved. So the Jews will be, Mordechai says to Esther, the Jews will be saved either way. But va'atu beis ovich, you, Esther, your father's house, Shaul HaMelech, All of those generations of Jews are pleading with you, please, let's get the job done. Let's finish it. Let's wipe out Haman and be done with this. He says to Esther, this is the reason why you've become queen. Although Hashem removed Malchus from Shaul and his descendants, still Mordechai says to Esther, you find yourself in a position of royalty because Hashem has given us this opportunity to finally bring this thing full circle and kill the descendant of Agag, Haman, which our ancestor Shaul HaMelech was supposed to do when he was supposed to kill Agag. He didn't, and so we have this now. Okay. But let's focus, at least for today, just for the next couple of minutes, let's focus on this story itself. The story of Shmuel being empowered, being given the mandate to go and annihilate Amalek, and dropping the ball, not killing the animals, and not killing Agag at least long enough for the king to make more trouble. The story of the Jewish people trying to rid themselves of the nation of Amalek comes up many times, right? When the Jewish people came out of Mitzrayim, that was the first time. Shaul is the second time. Later on, the Gemara says, David HaMelech sent his chief of staff, Yoav, his nephew, to go and wipe out Amalek. Right? The Gemara says very famously, Yoav went to wipe out Amalek. He gathered together an army. This is in the days of David HaMelech, after Shaul HaMelech. Yoav gathers together an army and he goes and he wipes out all the males of the nation of Amalek. He comes back to David HaMelech. David HaMelech says, no. Yoav says, I killed all the males. David says, you killed all the males. Who told you to do that? Yoav says, what do you mean, who told me to do that? That's what it says in the Torah. Where does it say that in the Torah? Well, Yoav says, the Torah says, Timcha es Zachor Amalek. Yoav says, the Torah says, annihilate the males of Amalek. Timcha es Zachor Amalek. Oiga, Val says, David, that's not how you read the pasuk. It's not Timcha es Zachor Amalek, annihilate the males of Amalek. It's Timcha es Zecher Amalek, annihilate the memory of Amalek. You're supposed to kill everybody, men, women, everybody. Yoav says, but that's not how my teacher taught me to read the pasuk. My teacher taught me Timcha Zachor Amalek. All right, the Gemara says Yoav was very upset with his teacher. He went to find his teacher. According to some opinions in the Gemara, Yoav actually killed his teacher because he was so upset with him for teaching him the wrong pshat in the pasuk. The Gemara says, by the way, from there you learn that it's more important that a teacher teach correctly, even if the teacher covers less volume, than for the teacher to cover more volume, but not with the same quality. That's what the Gemara says, Masechta Baba Basra. From here you learn, says the Gemara, that when it comes to teaching Torah, quality is more important than quantity. Apparently, Yoav's teacher was too hooked, was too invested in teaching the students quantity. And so they didn't spend enough time on the quality of the verses, and Yoav walked away with a misunderstanding, a misreading of the pasuk. He thought the pasuk says, annihilate the males of Amalek. Instead, the Torah says, annihilate the memory of Amalek. Had Yoav learned the pasuk correctly, had he been taught correctly by his teacher, he would have wiped out the whole nation of Amalek. There would have been nothing left. And so it goes. The Jewish people, when they come out of Egypt, are unsuccessful at annihilating Amalek. Shaul doesn't annihilate Amalek. David and Yoav don't annihilate Amalek. Even in the story of Esther, even after Haman is hung, and his 10 sons are hung, 10 sons are killed and hung. The Gemara says, according to some opinions, Haman had many, many other sons. According to some opinions, he had hundreds of sons. And unfortunately, in one form or another, Jews have always, throughout history, Jews have always faced their fair share of the Amaleks of every generation. But again, for today, just for a few minutes, let's go back to the story of Shaul. What went wrong? What went wrong in the story of Shaul? It seems as if Shmuel's instructions to Shaul are not ambiguous in any way. They seem crystal clear. He tells him to go and wage war with Amalek, kill men, women, children, even infants, even nursing babies, oxen, sheep, camels, and donkeys. He tells him to wipe them all out and don't leave anything behind. When the instruction was so clear, why was Shaul HaMelech having a hard time carrying out these instructions? And even worse, why does he have a hard time understanding that he has not carried out the instructions? When he's finally faced with the truth and Shmuel says to him, what did you do? Or what did you not do? Why does Shaul have such a hard time with this? The commentaries, by the way, this is also well known. The commentaries say that the nation of Amalek were gifted in the craft of black magic. They were gifted in the craft of being able to perform stuff, to do things of magical nature. It's called kosim ksomim. And so when they saw that Shaul and his army were having a hard time killing the animals, they were able, this is what the commentaries say, many of the citizens of Amalek, through powers that we don't understand, were able to actually transform themselves into animals. And later transform themselves back into people, which is why one generation later, in the days of David HaMelech, you have a need to go once again and wipe out the nation of Amalek. But what happened to Shaul HaMelech? Why did Shaul HaMelech, how did he botch this mission? The Gemara wastes no effort and energy in describing the holiness of Shaul HaMelech at the time that he was anointed as king. The Torah itself says he was head and shoulders above the people, which of course doesn't just mean that he was physically tall. It means he was huge in spiritual stature. He was a divine, godly man. He was humble. He was chosen by Hashem to be the king over the Jewish people, the first king. And yet everything goes wrong. Everything, it collapses like a pack of cards. He can't do it. And again, as you read the story, Shaul HaMelech blames the people. He says, oh, the people had mercy on the sheep. The people, then later on, Shaul says, I was afraid. Shaul says, I was afraid of the people. I can't find it right now. But Shaul actually tells him, Yeah, here it is, Pasuk of Dalet. Shaul says to Shmuel, I've sinned. Eventually, Shaul acknowledges, he faces his own sin. He says, I've desecrated the word of Hashem, I've desecrated your words. He says, Ki yoresi esa'am, because I feared the people. And I listened to their voice. With everything that Shaul was, with his leadership abilities, with the fact that he was chosen to be king, what went wrong? Why did Shaul not own the moment and really do what it is that he was told to do by Hashem? There is a fascinating Gemara. Again, if you have the Haftorah in front of you, in Pasuk Hey, the Torah describes Shaul HaMelech preparing for war. He gathers 210,000 soldiers, been given an instruction to wipe out the nation of Amalek. And the Pasuk says, the Torah says, Pasuk Hey, Vayovoy Shaul ad ir Amalek. Shaul, together with his entire army, advances all the way up to the capital city of Amalek. Quote, Vayorev banocha. And he waged his war in the valley. He waged his war in the valley. The simple meaning of this, that Shaul waged war in the valley, is that Shaul he gathers the nation together with his army. He gathers the people. He wages war against Amalek in a valley. And there Shaul has his miraculous, fantastic victory against the people that he's fighting against. And the Gemara says that's not what it means. Or that's not all it means. Vayorev banochal, he waged war in the valley. Nachal, says the Gemara, can also mean a river. And as Shaul HaMelech is about to wage war against Amalek, Shaul HaMelech, says the Gemara Masechta Yuma, is reminded of a mitzvah. And the mitzvah, says the Gemara, is Eglo Arufa. Now, what do we want here with Eglo Arufa? Hold on to your heads. What's the mitzvah of Eglo Arufa? The mitzvah of Eglo Arufa, the Torah says, is, we studied this a couple of weeks ago, a man is found dead in the field. Noifel Basoda, the Torah says, nobody knows who killed him. They measure from the corpse till the closest city. And the elders and the leaders of that city have to go out and bring a kapora. They go down to the river and they bring a kapora, they bring an atonement for this corpse that has fallen in the field and nobody knows who killed him. Vayorev banochal, says the Torah, Shaul HaMelech stood there as he was about to annihilate Amalek. And he fought. With whom did he fight, says the Gemara? He fought with himself. He was torn inside himself. And he said to himself, Rabbeinu Shalom, I don't understand this. When one man dies in the field and nobody knows who killed him, the Torah says the elders and the judges of the closest city are responsible. They have to come out and they have to break the neck of a calf and they have to say, our hands didn't spill this blood. We are not responsible for this person's death. And now, says Shaul, the Torah, Hashem has instructed me to kill so many people pointlessly. And even if the men deserve to be killed, why do the women deserve to be killed? And even if the women deserve to be killed, why do the children deserve to be killed? And even if the children deserve to be killed, why the babies, Rahman al-Islam? And even if the babies, why the animals? Surely this is a Torah that is concerned, that warns us against unnecessary spilling of blood. Surely this is a merciful Rabbeinu Shalom, a merciful Hashem, who can't stand to see innocent people get killed. I mean, for one person who gets killed, the elders of the city have to come out and ask for an atonement, ask for a kapora. And now, says Shaul, I'm being asked to wipe out this entire nation. Men, women, children, babies, animals, oxen, sheep, camels, donkeys, everything. So Shaul gathers the entire army because that's what he was told to do. And Shaul gathers all his people because that's what he was told to do. And he advances all the way to the city of Amalek. And as he's about to wage war with the city of Amalek, another war breaks out. Vayorev banochal, he starts to wrestle with himself. What kind of a mission have I been given to do here? And he has a hard time with it. Let's face it. The truth is, the story is a very disturbing story. It's an incredibly difficult story to understand. Hashem really instructed, and when you read the story at face value, Hashem instructed Shaul and the Jewish people to commit genocide on the nation of Amalek, to wipe them all out and leave no trace behind. Of course, we associate Amalek with murderers. We associate Amalek with bloodthirsty anti-Semites. We associate Amalek as the nation to produce the Hamans and the Nebuchadnezzars and the Hitlers and all of the arch enemies of the Jewish people throughout our enemies, throughout our generations, throughout our years, throughout our history. Of course, all of these are associated either biologically, literally, or spiritually. It's all descendants of Amalek, of course. But what Shaul HaMelech was asked to do at that time was something he had an incredibly difficult time with. And the Torah says, Vayorev Banochal, he stood there and he fought and he wrestled. It doesn't just mean he wrestled with Amalek. He wrestled within himself. Perhaps he even tried to ask this question to Hashem. Hashem, what? Why? What's the purpose? Why am I being told to do this? And inside Shaul, there's a battle that wages. That's the way the Gemara explains the term, Vayorev Banochal. He fought. It can be translated to mean he fought in the valley, but it can also mean he fought at the river, meaning he bearing in mind the mitzvah that has to do with the river, bearing in mind the mitzvah of Eglo Arufa, where an atonement has to be brought by the Jews for one unnecessary death. Shaul had a very hard time bringing himself to a place psychologically and emotionally where he felt comfortable to go and wipe out an entire nation. The Gemara describes that at great length. You can look it up in Masechta Yoma. The Gemara Shaul says, if the men deserve to be killed, what did the women do wrong? And if the women deserve to be killed, what about the children? And if the children, what about the babies? And if all human beings, what about the animals? Everything should be wiped out. And then, because Shaul was given an instruction by Hashem, and because he knew he had to carry out the instruction, although he experienced within himself insecurity and doubt, struggle, although he wrestled with himself in terms of being able to fulfill this mitzvah, he went ahead and he fulfilled it. And he wiped out to the best of his ability all those people that he couldn't understand or he couldn't see the value in why Hashem wanted him to do this. He did it anyways. But it was imperfect. It was lacking. He left the king alive. He allowed the nation to leave some of the animals alive. He let them get away with it. He let it slip and he let it slide. And the Gemara says, you know why he let it slip? And you know why he let it slide? Because at some level, psychologically or emotionally, Shaul HaMelech, or spiritually, of course, Shaul HaMelech himself was uncomfortable with it. He didn't like it. He was Vayorev Banochal. He was struggling in his own soul with this mitzvah. And because of that, the fulfillment of the mitzvah was lacking and it was incomplete. What's the truth? The truth is that this was a mitzvah given by Hashem. Because Hashem saw and Hashem knew that there wasn't a single person, there wasn't a single part of this nation that was salvageable. There wasn't anything of it, not physically and not spiritually, that could be salvaged and that could be saved. And if we leave Agag alive, if we leave the king alive, even just for 24 hours, this will produce a Haman and a Nebuchadnezzar and all sorts of unspeakable tragedies in Jewish history. The truth is, Hashem saw everything that was going to happen in the future. And had Shaul fulfilled the word of Hashem with a full heart, with a whole heart, he would have saved the Jews and the world a lot of sorrows in the future. But Shaul was a holy man. Shaul was a spiritual great man. Shaul was an incredibly brilliant man. And Shaul was a sensitive man. And even as he stood there engaged in war, within his own soul, he was in turmoil. Somewhere inside him, a voice said, "What am I doing?" He was worried that he was killing innocent people. And because of that, he struggled within himself. Make no mistake, my friends. The Torah does blame Shaul. Although the Torah says over and over again that it wasn't his decision to save the sheep, that wasn't his decision to save the animals, right? It was the people's. The Torah does blame Shaul HaMelech for this. Because if there is any weakness in the heart of the leader, if there is any doubt in the heart of the king, if the king himself isn't ironclad in his resolve, then somewhere, somehow this is going to play out. And somewhere, somehow, somewhere further down the line, the people are going to not do everything that they're supposed to do. And whether they're aware of it or not, the weakness that plays out somewhere down the line can be attributed to the struggle that goes on in the mind and in the heart of the king. Shaul should have taken upon himself a very, very different attitude. What should Shaul have done? What should Shaul have thought? Actually, Shmuel Hanavi tells him exactly what he should have done. He says to him, you know, there's something that Hashem prefers more than sacrifices. There's something that Hashem prefers more than all the most wonderful service and all the most wonderful things that you can do. There's something that's Hashem prefers that is superior and that needs, that is the first and foremost criteria of being a Jewish leader and a Jewish king. And you know what it is? It's the ability to do what it is that Hashem tells you to do it with a full heart, with a full resolve, even when you don't understand why, but dafka when you don't understand why, and to rest assured that Hashem knows exactly what Hashem is doing. And if this is the instruction that you've been given, you do it without struggle. Rest assured, the same Hashem that gave the mitzvah of Eglo Arufa gave Shaul the mitzvah to annihilate Amalek, everything and everyone. Shaul HaMelech says, but I don't understand how that's possible. How can the same Hashem, who's so concerned with the spilling of the innocent blood of one person, give me, Shaul, a mitzvah to commit genocide? How can Hashem do that? I don't understand. I'm struggling with this. I'm torn. Shmuel says, I'm so sorry, my friend. You're not the king of the Jews. You're not Melech Yisrael. If you're struggling with this, it's not your destiny. A king needs to have the heart of a lion. If this is what Hashem told me, then this is what I'm going to do. I understand it or I don't understand it. It doesn't make any difference. We see so little bit of Hashem's plan. As human beings, as mortals, we're so incredibly limited in what we can see and what we can perceive. Shmuel Hanavi says to him, you expect Hashem to explain his ways to you? It doesn't work that way. Sometimes we understand, sometimes we don't. Sometimes we see, sometimes we don't. Sometimes we have more insight, sometimes we have less insights. Sometimes we understand why Hashem puts certain people in certain positions, and sometimes we don't. And that's okay. As long as you trust that this is what Hashem, as long as you know that this is what Hashem wants from you, you have to be able to fulfill it with a full heart. It wasn't that Shmuel was upset with Shaul for being human. It was that Shmuel was upset with Shaul for struggling to fulfill the instructions of Hashem when they were so clear in being delivered. The Torah holds Shaul responsible for this. You as a leader, if you would have been stronger within yourself, if there wouldn't have been struggle, if there wouldn't have been internal chaos within you, Shaul, then there wouldn't have been external chaos outside of you. Shaul says, I was afraid of the people. You know why Shaul was afraid of the people? Shaul was a mighty warrior. Shaul was the king. The people trembled in front of him. Why was he afraid of the people? He was afraid the people would look at him and accuse him of doing something that he himself didn't feel secure about. Who said, nobody can make you feel inferior without your consent. Nobody can make you be afraid without your consent. Shaul HaMelech knew that if the people came to him and said to him, you're acting in a way which is cruel, Shaul knew that they would strike a chord within him and they would make him feel guilty. And so Shmuel told him, it's not going to be you. Korah Hashem es mamluchos Yisrael me'alecha. Hashem is going to tear the kingdom of the Jews away from you and give it to somebody else who's better. And eventually it went to David HaMelech, who, of course, the Gemara says, right, David HaMelech had his own challenges. David HaMelech had his own stories, and David HaMelech had his own stuff. But it seems that David didn't have this struggle. David didn't have this struggle that Shaul had when he received an instruction from Hashem, when he was told what it is that he was supposed to do. He went and he did it, and he didn't question. It wasn't because Shaul wasn't great. It wasn't because Shaul wasn't holy. It wasn't because he wasn't scholarly. It wasn't because he wasn't sensitive. He was all of that. Worthy of being the king of the Jews. But perhaps his own sensitivity, his own abhorrence to things that didn't seem just, perhaps it was that more than anything that got in his way as he was asked to wipe out the nation of Amalek. And the nation of Amalek survived. And for that, in that sense, Hashem, the Torah holds Shaul responsible. When I was a young man engaged to get married, I heard a beautiful story. Again, the details, the context, not 100% sure, but the story carries its weight and has an important message. They said there was once a wealthy man who was summoned by his Rebbe, by his Rosh Yeshiva, to give a certain amount of money to tzedakah. And they said to him, Rabbi Yid, we need your help. We need your support. We need you to give us a certain amount. And we know that you can. We know that you're capable. Please help us with a particular amount of money to tzedakah. And the wealthy man turns to his Rebbe, his Rosh Yeshiva, and he says, you know something? You're right. I have the money. I can afford to give what it is that you're asking for. And I even want to. I want to give this money to the yeshiva, to the project, to help other people, whatever it is I want to. He says, but I can't. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't say I can't. He said, but there's something I need to tell you. My family, he says, are very, very disappointed with me for giving too much money to tzedakah. If I come home and tell them, in general, my family is upset with me for giving too much money to tzedakah. If I come home and tell them that I've given this amount of money to tzedakah, they're going to leave me. They're going to disassociate themselves from me. They feel like I'm being irresponsible. Rebbe, he said, I'm happy to give the money. I want to, in fact. But I'll pay a personal price for my family, for my wife, for my children. I don't know if I'll ever be able to recover from it. So Rebbe, says the wealthy man to his Rosh Yeshiva, I'm going to put the question back in your court. You tell me. Should I give the money or not? I have it. I can give it. It'll be yours. But I'll pay a personal price. on the family front, in the family unit, it will do devastating amounts of damage to my family life. If you tell me to do it anyways, I'll do it anyways. But I just want you to know before I give it, that this is the price I'm going to pay. And his Rosh Yeshiva says to him, please don't. Please, don't give me the money. Don't give us the money. Keep it. I don't want you to pay that kind of a personal price for giving this kind of tzedakah. Revach v'hatzolo yamoid laYehudim mimokem acher. We'll get the salvation from somewhere else. I appreciate your generosity. I appreciate your willingness to do this at such an incredible price, to pay such a personal price for it. I cannot do that to you. I cannot live with that kind of guilt, the Rosh Yeshiva says, to take that kind of money, put you in that kind of a position. No, it's okay. Thank you very much. But I will give you a piece of advice. I will give you a piece of advice, says the Rosh Yeshiva and the Rebbe. I'll tell you what it is. Ask yourself, if you were to have given the money, if there would have been hidden somewhere inside you, perhaps, a little bit of resentment or struggle or resistance, that's a better word, or resistance to give this type of money to charity, to give this kind of money to tzedakah, ask yourself if you were really doing it b'leiv shalom. Because sometimes the people closest to us can tell that we're struggling with something in ways that we ourselves are not honest. Not honest with them and not even honest with ourselves. Particularly a spouse, particularly a woman, can sometimes tell when her husband is saying something and doing something and engaging in something, but it's not b'leiv shalom. It's not with a full heart. Somewhere deep in the deep recesses of his heart, emotionally or psychologically, he's struggling with it and he doesn't like it. Says the Rosh Yeshiva, the family may be giving, maybe not. Ask yourself this question honestly. Maybe the reason why your family is challenging you on this is because they get the sense that somewhere deep within you, even you don't want to be doing this. And if you were to truly want it with a full heart, they would be only too happy for you to do this. It's not my place, said the Rosh Yeshiva, to tell you one way or the other. I just want you to think about it, because it's a possibility. Sometimes people around us in life tell us things about ourselves that we ourselves are not completely honest with ourselves about. And they bring it to our attention because they can sense it in us, particularly a spouse and particularly a wife, in ways that we ourselves are not open to. It was the fault of Shaul HaMelech that his people saved the animals. It was the fault of Shaul HaMelech that his people didn't go out with a full heart, with a mission statement of fulfilling the word of Hashem without question and doing whatever it is that Hashem says. Even when we don't understand, or I would say specifically when we don't understand. At some level, the Torah says, Shaul HaMelech is at fault. Because instead of working on himself to believe and to trust wholeheartedly that everything Hashem says is exactly the way it's supposed to be, without question. Instead of standing there at the borders of the city of Amalek, closing his eyes and making the proverbial bracha of Asher Kiddushanu b'mitzvoso v'tzivonu. Hashem has sanctified us with a mitzvah and he's commanded us. And there's a reason why we use the word command. We use the word command because when you're on the receiving end of a command, understanding the justice of the commandment, understanding the wisdom of the commandment, is not a prerequisite in fulfilling it. Had Shaul HaMelech done that, he would have motivated, as the king of the people, he would have, the people who loved him, he would have motivated them to do the same, to engage in the instruction of Hashem, to do so without question. Instead, he stood there at the borders of the city, torn up within himself, thinking about Eglo Arufo and where's the justice in this and how do I wrap my head around this? The question is not an easy question to answer. You know, my friends, there's no shortage of difficult questions to answer. Why did Hashem give him the instruction that way? Couldn't have been possible there was somebody in the nation of Amalek who was innocent? Is that not possible? And to wipe out the children, Rahman litzlan? There's no shortage of unanswerable questions. So what? So what? Because I don't understand the answer to the question doesn't mean that I don't fulfill the word of Hashem with a whole heart. And if Shaul HaMelech would have only been able to take that approach, then he would have been able to motivate the people with the same mindset. Everybody knew Hashem said wipe out the animals. Everybody knew Hashem said wipe them all out. They would have gone and they would have fulfilled the word of Hashem. His own inner struggles spilled out into the Jewish people. And because of that, the mission was botched. And because of that, Malchus, royalty, was taken away from him. In a sense, every Jew is a king. In a sense, every Jew has an influence on his or her surroundings. In a sense, every Jew has been given and gifted with the opportunity and the ability to make a difference in the world. The Torah says, make no mistake. Hinei shmoya mizevach toiv, the most important quality of a leader, of a Jewish leader, the most important quality of a Torah leader is a leader who can stand up and say, ich verstehe yo, ich verstehe nit. I do understand, I don't understand. I will fulfill the word of Hashem exactly as it was given to me. I'm not going to sit there and make calculations. Well, if we take the animals, we can offer them up as sacrifices to Hashem. The commentaries make an amazing observation. They say, why did Shaul capture Agag? Because in those days when you were victorious over a people, you didn't kill the king, you captured the king, you locked him up, and you displayed him as your medal of honor. Look what we did. We annihilated Amalek. Here's the king. Shaul wanted to take Agag and parade him around as the icon of their victory. Perhaps a noble intention, but once again, not the instruction of Hashem. Sometimes we do understand why Hashem tells us to do certain things. Sometimes we don't. Either way, in positions of leadership, we always develop, the trust to know that Hashem runs the world. And Hashem ultimately decides. And as Mordechai says to Esther, the fact that you're even king, the fact that you're even queen, is to fulfill this mission of Hashem. That's why Hashem put you here. Don't get weak in the knees now. Don't lose faith. Don't lose focus. This is why Hashem put you here. The Jewish people will be saved. One way or another, the Jewish people will be safe. But as a leader, this is your moment to fulfill the instructions of Hashem without question. You know who fixed it? You know who fixed the whole thing? Esther. Esther fixed it. Esther says to Mordechai, you're giving me an instruction that makes no sense. I don't understand what you're saying. There's no logic. Go to the king uninvited, the king will kill me. And then what have I accomplished? Mordechai says to her, Mordechai is the prophet of the generation. He gives Esther an instruction. Mordechai says to Esther, don't make the same mistake as your great-grandfather Shaul HaMelech. I'm telling you, says Mordechai, this is an instruction that's coming to you from Hashem. Go and do it. And she does. And she approaches the king, right? The Medrash says very famously, Achashverosh says, I don't understand what's going on. One wife, I call her, she doesn't come. The other wife, I don't call her and she comes. Initially, they were going to kill her. She was miraculously saved. And then she saved the entire Jewish nation. What was the moment? What was the pivotal moment in the story of the Megillah Esther? Who's the real hero of the story of Megillah Esther? It's Esther. What was the pivotal moment? The moment she went without fear and said, I'm going to fulfill what it is upon me now to do. And she presented herself for Achashverosh. That was the moment she sealed victory and salvation for herself and for the Jewish nation. May Hashem help us as we face our own challenges and our own journey through life. We always remember to stay true, to keep the faith. We always remember to stay true to our mission and to follow Hashem's instructions. Please God. And to do it exactly as Hashem said so, and to have the wisdom to trust that all of Hashem's ways are just. Please God, this year, when we celebrate Purim in Yerushalayim, Yer HaKodesh, together with the coming of Mashiach, we'll be reunited with Mordechai and with Esther, and with Shaul and with Shmuel and with David HaMelech, and all the most wonderful Jews. Have a wonderful Shabbos.